What's up guys, and welcome to Fear Feed, the channel where I tell you scary stories. In this video, I decided to do something a little bit different and had AI write me a collection of scary stories. This should be interesting. But keep your expectations in check, but I hope you enjoy it. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Now to the stories.
The old lighthouse keeper, Silas, swore the sea whispered his name. Not a gentle murmur, but a raspy, salt-encrusted croak that clawed at his sanity. He'd lived on this craggy, isolated isle for 30 years, the rhythmic pulse of the lamp his only companion. But lately the rhythm had been off. It started with the gulls. They'd always been raucous, circling like tattered scraps of sky. But now their cries were a mournful, drawn-out wail, as if they were mourning something lost or anticipating something terrible. One night a fog rolled in, thick and cloying, a spectral blanket that swallowed the light. The foghorn, usually a booming sentinel, sounded weak, choked like a dying beast. Silas, his weathered face etched with worry, peered into the swirling grey, his lantern casting a feeble yellow glow. He heard it then, a scraping sound, like barnacles against stone, but deeper, heavier. It was coming from the rocks below where the tide gnawed at the island's base. He gripped his lantern tighter, his knuckles white. The scraping intensified, followed by a low guttural groan. The air grew heavy, thick with the stench of brine and something else, something ancient and foul. A wave, larger than any he'd seen, crashed against the rocks, and in the brief flickering light of his lantern, he saw it, a shape, vast and dark, rising from the churning foam. It wasn't a whale nor any creature he recognized. It was a tangle of glistening black limbs, studded with barnacles, and a head crowned with a mass of writhing, seaweed-like tendrils. Its eyes, if they could be called eyes, were 2 points of cold phosphorescent light burning through the fog. Silas, a man who'd faced countless storms, felt his blood turn to ice. He stumbled back, his breath catching in his throat. The creature's voice, a chorus of rasping whispers, filled the night. It wasn't a language he understood, but he felt the meaning, a cold, crushing weight of dread. Silas, the whispers hissed, his name a curse on the wind. The creature's limbs reached for the lighthouse, its massive form rising from the sea. The foghorn, finally giving out, let out one last choked groan. The lantern flickered and died, plunging the island into absolute darkness. The last thing Silas saw before the darkness consumed him was the creature's phosphorescent eyes, burning like twin stars in the abyss, and the endless black ocean reaching for him, eager to claim its own. The lighthouse lamp, once a beacon of hope, was extinguished, and the sea's whispers grew louder, a chorus of the damned, forever calling Silas's name. Now for our next story, the Leviathan. The hum began subtly, a low thrumming vibration that resonated through the hull of the Leviathan. Captain Elias Thorne, a man whose face was etched with the salt and storms of a lifetime at sea, frowned. It wasn't the usual groan of the ship's timbers, nor the rhythmic pulse of the engine. This was something else. They were deep, miles beyond the continental shelf, where the ocean plunged into abyssal trenches unknown to most. The sonar, usually a comforting pulse of light, flickered erratically, painting chaotic, unreadable patterns. The crew, a seasoned bunch, exchanged uneasy glances. "What's that, Captain?" asked Finn, the young green sonar operator, his voice a strained whisper. "I don't know," Thorne replied, his eyes fixed on the chaotic sonar screen. "But it's big, very big." Then the lights began to dim, flickering like dying embers. A cold, thick dread settled over the ship. The hum intensified, vibrating through their bones, a primal, unsettling sound. Suddenly the ship lurched violently, throwing men off their feet. A monstrous, grinding sound echoed from below. "Something's hit us!" someone screamed. Thorne rushed to the bridge, his heart pounding. The sonar screen was now a swirling vortex of static. The ship listed heavily, the deck tilted at an alarming angle. Through the rain-streaked windows he saw it, a colossal shadow, a dark, undulating mass that dwarfed the Leviathan, rising from the depths. Its surface was a slick black expanse, marked with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed with an eerie, hypnotic rhythm. Then, the true horror revealed itself. From the black mass, long, sinuous tentacles emerged, thick as the ship's mast, tipped with rows of razor-sharp phosphorescent barbs. They coiled around the hull, squeezing, crushing. "Mayday, Mayday, we're under attack," Thorne yelled into the radio. His voice lost in the cacophony of the ship's groaning metal and the monstrous hum. The tentacles tightened, the ship's metal screaming in protest. The lights flickered and died, plunging the Leviathan into absolute darkness. The only illumination came from the creature's bioluminescent patterns, casting an unsettling, otherworldly glow on the terrified faces of the crew. One of the tentacles smashed through the bridge window, shattering the glass and sending shards flying. Thorne felt a searing pain as a barb grazed his arm, the wound glowing with an unnatural light. He watched, transfixed in horror, as the tentacle snaked through the ruined window, its tip reaching for him. The hum reached a deafening crescendo, a sound that seemed to penetrate the very core of their being. The ship groaned, its hull buckling under the immense pressure. Thorne saw the fear in his crew's eyes, a reflection of his own terror. Then, with a final agonizing screech, the Leviathan was pulled beneath the surface, swallowed by the inky blackness. Our next story is called The Abyss. The dive team, composed of 4 seasoned divers, descended into the inky depths of the ocean, their lights cutting through the darkness like beacons in a storm. They were exploring a newly discovered underwater cave system, a labyrinth of tunnels and chambers, promising untold wonders and dangers. As they ventured deeper, the water grew colder, the pressure heavier and the silence more profound. The only sounds were the rhythmic thumps of their heartbeats and the steady hiss of their regulators. Suddenly their lights flickered and died, plunging them into absolute darkness. Panic threatened to grip them, but years of training and countless dives instilled in them a sense of calm. They activated their emergency lights, their beams feeble against the overwhelming darkness. As they cautiously navigated the pitch-black depths, a sense of dread crept over them. The silence was no longer peaceful, it was deafening, oppressive. They felt watched, followed by unseen eyes in the impenetrable darkness. Then they heard it, a low, guttural growl echoing through the cave system, sending shivers down their spines. The growl grew louder, closer, until it seemed to emanate from all directions. Fear turned to terror as they realized they were not alone. Something was out there, something ancient and malevolent, drawn to the depths of the ocean. The divers huddled together, their lights casting a feeble circle of light around them. They could barely make out the shapes of their companions, their faces etched with fear. The growling intensified, and a sense of dread washed over them. They knew they had to find a way out, but the darkness was disorienting, and the growling seemed to be coming from everywhere. Suddenly, a shape emerged from the darkness. A monstrous creature with glowing eyes and razor-sharp teeth. The divers screamed in terror as the creature lunged towards them, its claws raking against the cave walls. They fought back, their knives flashing in the darkness, but the creature was too strong, too fast. One by one the divers fell, their screams echoing through the cave system until they were silenced. The creature stood over the bodies of its prey, its eyes glowing with satisfaction. It had claimed another victim, another soul lost to the depths of the ocean. The darkness returned, the silence broken only by the gentle lapping of the waves against the cave walls. The creature remained, its presence a constant reminder of the dangers that lurked beneath the surface. Our next story is called The Ghost Ship. The sun beat down on the deck of the fishing trawler Sea Serpent as it plowed through the choppy waters of the Atlantic Ocean. The crew, a motley bunch of weathered sailors, were on their annual tuna fishing expedition, their eyes peeled for the telltale signs of a good catch. Captain Jack, a grizzled old sea dog with a weathered face and a twinkle in his eye, steered the ship with a steady hand. His first mate, Finn, a young and eager sailor with a thirst for adventure, stood beside him, scanning the horizon. "Anything on the radar, Finn?" Jack asked, his voice raspy from years of salt water and tobacco. Finn squinted into the distance. "Nothing yet, Captain. but I swear I can smell a storm brewing." Jack chuckled. "Aye, Finn, you're always smelling a storm." Just then, Finn's eyes widened. "Look!" he exclaimed, pointing towards the horizon. "What's that?" A dark shape loomed in the distance, a derelict ship adrift in the vast expanse of the ocean. Its hull was weathered and barnacled, its masts snapped and twisted like gnarled fingers. A sense of unease settled over the crew as they approached the abandoned vessel. As they drew closer, the ship loomed larger, its decaying grandeur a stark contrast to the vibrant blue of the ocean. A thick layer of dust coated its deck, and a strange metallic tang hung in the air. With trepidation, the crew climbed aboard, their footsteps echoing through the silent corridors. The ship was eerily still, an oppressive silence broken only by the creaking of the timbers and the distant cries of seagulls. They explored the ship, their curiosity tempered by a growing sense of unease. The ship was a labyrinth of decaying rooms and passageways, each one filled with the ghosts of its past. They discovered a hidden chamber, its walls adorned with strange symbols and hieroglyphics. A sense of dread washed over them as they realized they were not alone. The air grew heavy and the temperature plummeted. The crew felt a chill creep up their spines, as if they were being watched. Then they saw them, ghostly figures, their faces obscured by shadows, their eyes glowing with an eerie light. The ghostly figures moved with an unnatural grace, their movements fluid and silent. They glided through the corridors, their presence palpable yet intangible. The crew felt a sense of dread, a primal fear that threatened to consume them. The ghostly figures began to circle the crew, their eyes fixed on them with an intensity that chilled them to the bone. The crew tried to escape, but the ghostly figures were faster, their movements fluid and silent. They were trapped. The ghostly figures began to chant, their voices echoing through the ship. The crew felt a strange sensation, as if their bodies were being pulled apart, their minds slipping into a void. They were being drawn into another dimension, a place of darkness and despair. The crew fought against the pull, but it was futile. Their bodies grew heavy, their movements sluggish. They were losing control, their minds slipping away. As the crew succumbed to the pull, they saw the ghostly figures smile, their eyes glowing with satisfaction. They had claimed another victim, another soul lost to the depths of the void. The crew of the Sea Serpent vanished, their bodies absorbed into the darkness, their screams echoing through the empty corridors of the derelict ship. The ghostly figures remained, their eyes glowing with anticipation, waiting for their next victims. Our next story is called Shipwrecked. The storm had been a relentless beast, a churning maelstrom of wind and water that seemed determined to swallow the small sailboat whole. Arthur, a seasoned sailor but no match for this tempest, clung to the splintering remnants of his vessel, the Wanderer, as the waves crashed over him. Days blurred into a nightmare of cold, fear and exhaustion. Then, just as his strength was failing, the storm abruptly ceased. Arthur awoke on a beach of pristine white sand, the sun warm on his battered face. The Wanderer was little more than a collection of broken planks scattered along the shore. He was alive but stranded. The island was a paradox. Lush vegetation thrived, vibrant flowers bloomed, and exotic birds called from the dense jungle canopy. But an unsettling silence hung in the air, a sense of being watched. His first priority was survival. He scavenged what he could from the wreckage, a tattered sailcloth, a rusted knife, a few waterlogged containers. He found a freshwater stream trickling from the jungle's edge and fashioned a crude shelter from branches and the sailcloth. Food was a challenge. He learned to identify edible plants cautiously at first, testing small amounts to avoid poisoning himself. He discovered that the island teemed with fish, and using sharpened sticks, he became a clumsy but persistent fisherman. The jungle, however, held both promise and peril. It was on one of his foraging expeditions that he encountered them. They emerged from the shadows of the jungle, silent and swift. Their bodies were painted with intricate designs, and they carried spears and clubs. Their eyes, dark and intense, held a chilling hunger. Arthur froze, and then instinct took over. He fled. He learned quickly that these were the island's true inhabitants, a tribe unlike any he had ever encountered. They were cannibals, their presence marked by gruesome trophies and remnants of their feasts. The silence he had sensed was the silence of hunters. Survival became a desperate game of cat and mouse. He moved his shelter frequently, leaving false trails and obscuring his tracks. He became a ghost in the jungle, a shadow among shadows. He honed his skills. The rusted knife became an extension of his hand, a tool for cutting, carving, and defense. He learned to craft traps, snares, and primitive weapons. He studied the cannibals' movements, their hunting patterns, their rituals. Fear fueled his ingenuity. The jungle, once a place of beauty, became his battleground. He used its dense foliage for cover, its vines for climbing, its shadows for concealment. He learned to mimic the sounds of the island, to blend seamlessly into his surroundings. One day, they found him. A hunting party, larger and more determined than any he had encountered before, tracked him to his hidden camp. He fought with the desperation of a cornered animal, his knife a blur of motion, but they were too many. He was captured, bound, and dragged to their village. The village was a nightmare. Fires crackled, casting grotesque shadows on the faces of the cannibals. He saw the remains of their victims, a horrifying testament to their brutality. He was tied to a stake, the ritual preparations underway. The air was thick with anticipation, the chanting of the cannibals a chilling dirge. But even in the face of death, Arthur refused to surrender. He had survived too much to die here. As the ritual reached its climax, a distraction, a sudden commotion, a fight broke out among the cannibals themselves. Arthur seized the opportunity. He strained against his bonds, his muscles screaming in protest. He managed to loosen a knot, then another. He broke free. Chaos erupted. He used the confusion to his advantage, slipping through the melee, his heart pounding in his chest. He fled into the jungle, the sounds of pursuit echoing behind him. But this time, it was different. He was no longer just running. He was fighting back. He led them into traps he had prepared, ambushed them from the shadows, used the jungle as his weapon. He became the hunter, not the hunted. It was a brutal, desperate struggle, a war of survival against overwhelming odds. But Arthur, fueled by a primal instinct to live, fought with a ferocity he never knew he possessed. Slowly, painstakingly, he turned the tide. One by one, the cannibals fell. The final confrontation was a desperate dance of death. The last warrior, the tribe's leader, was a formidable opponent, his eyes burning with hatred. But Arthur, battered and bloodied, his spirit forged in the crucible of survival, prevailed. The silence that followed was profound. The jungle, once filled with the sounds of pursuit, was still. Arthur stood alone, the victor, but forever changed. He eventually found a way to signal for rescue, a passing ship drawn by the smoke of his signal fire. He left the island, but the island never truly left him. He carried its scars, its memories, its lessons. He had survived, not just the shipwreck, but the horrors that followed. He had learned the true meaning of survival, the resilience of the human spirit, and the darkness that lurks in the heart of humanity. Our next story is The Ocean's Silence. The sun was a blazing beacon in the cloudless sky as we pulled alongside the distressed sailboat. It was a picture-perfect day, the ocean a mirror reflecting the heavens. Yet, the three men aboard were pale and shaken, their eyes wide with a fear that didn't seem to fit the idyllic scene. "She just gave up," the captain, a wiry man named Silas, mumbled, his gaze fixed on the slowly submerging hull. "No warning, just started taking on water, faster than we could bail." We watched, a strange, silent audience, as the sailboat slipped beneath the surface. It was a slow, almost graceful descent, no dramatic gurgling, no violent thrashing, just a quiet surrender to the depths. A few bubbles like a sigh, and then nothing. The ocean was a mirror again, reflecting the cloudless sky. That's when the silence started to feel wrong, too profound, too complete. The kind of silence that presses against your eardrums, a silence that hummed with a hidden energy. Later, After we'd set course for port, I found myself staring at the empty expanse of water, the spot where the sailboat had vanished. A strange unease settled in my stomach. It wasn't the sinking itself or the fear in Silas's eyes. It was something else, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. That night the dreams started. Not my dreams, but Silas's. I saw the sailboat, not sinking, but floating, its hull a dark, gaping maw. Figures moved on the deck, their shapes distorted, their faces obscured by shadow. They weren't fighting the water, they were welcoming it, inviting it in. I woke with a gasp. The silence of my cabin amplified the gentle rocking of the ship, suddenly menacing. I went to the bridge, needing the reassurance of the others, the hum of the engines, the steady glow of the instruments. Captain Davies was at the helm, his gaze fixed on the horizon. I asked him if he'd seen anything strange, any unusual readings. He just shook his head, his eyes distant. "Sailboat? What sailboat?" he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Around here, I didn't see a sailboat." I felt a chill crawl down my spine. Had he forgotten, or was he pretending? The next day, the other 2 crew members we'd rescued were gone. No one remembered them. No one remembered the sinking sailboat. It was as if they had never been there. The logbook was empty, the radio transcript silent. The ocean remained a flawless mirror, reflecting the perfect sky. But beneath the surface I knew something was waiting, something that had taken the sailboat, and now it had taken their memories. It was a silence that consumed, a beauty that masked a terrible hunger. That night I went to the deck. The moon cast long, distorted shadows across the water. I saw them then. The figures moving beneath the surface, their shapes elongated, their eyes glowing with an eerie light. They were waiting, watching, their silent invitation echoing in the emptiness. I knew then, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the ocean hadn't simply taken the sailboat. It had claimed it, absorbed it, made it part of itself, and it was hungry for more. Our next story is called The Haunter Doll. In the heart of a quiet town, nestled amidst whispering trees and forgotten graveyards, stood an old abandoned toy store. Its windows, dusty and grimy, reflected the gloomy sky like a haunted mirror. Inside, cobwebs draped like ghostly veils over shelves laden with forgotten toys, teddy bears with vacant eyes, dolls with porcelain faces cracked and chipped, and rusty toy cars gathering dust. Amongst this collection of forgotten playthings stood a particularly eerie figure, an old wooden doll with vacant eyes and a bloody knife clutched in its hand. Its painted smile seemed to twist into a macabre sneer, and its lifeless stare pierced through the gloom, promising untold horrors. Legend whispered that the doll was cursed, its wooden heart filled with the vengeful spirit of a child wronged. Some said it was the ghost of a little girl, murdered by her jealous playmates, forever trapped within the doll's wooden form. Others claimed it was the spirit of a boy, driven to madness by his cruel toys, now seeking revenge on the innocent. Whatever the truth, the doll exuded an aura of malevolent energy, drawing the unwary into its clutches. Those who dared to gaze too long into its vacant eyes were said to be haunted by nightmares, their minds twisted and tormented by the doll's malevolent presence. One stormy night, a young boy named Timmy, drawn by an irresistible curiosity, ventured into the abandoned toy store. His flashlight beam danced across the dusty shelves, illuminating the forgotten toys in a macabre light. Then he saw it, the old wooden doll, its painted smile mocking him from the shadows. Timmy, despite his better judgment, was drawn to the doll. He reached out a trembling hand, his fingers brushing against the rough wood. As he touched the doll, a jolt of icy energy surged through him, and the world around him dissolved into a swirling vortex of darkness. When Timmy awoke, he found himself back in his room, but something had changed. The cheerful colors of his walls seemed muted, replaced by a sickly pallor. His toys, once sources of joy, now lay scattered and broken, their cheerful faces contorted into grotesque grimaces. And then he saw it. The old wooden doll perched on his bedside table, its vacant eyes watching him with chilling intensity. Timmy screamed, his voice echoing through the silent house, but the doll remained unmoved, its painted smile widening into a grotesque grin. From that night on, Timmy was never the same. His laughter turned to whispers, his playful spirit replaced by a haunting silence. The old wooden doll with its cursed presence had invaded his mind, turning his world into a living nightmare.
Well, that wraps up this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know down in the comments below. See you at the next one.